Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited. Isis, All That Glitters. The goddess next door takes on a bikini-clad bank robber in this action-packed all-new Isis series adventure. Get Isis, All That Glitters in paperback and Kindle Unlimited today. Recently, Johnson Publications, the former publisher of the magazines Ebony and Jet, filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. And with this filing of bankruptcy of Johnson Publications comes the end of an era in old black media. Now, Johnson Publications is an iconic institution in the black community because it was the first black-owned publisher in the United States. Your John H. Johnson started Johnson Publications with a $500 loan he got on some furniture in his home, and with that loan, he started a publishing business that chronicled black history and the black experience in the 20th century. And the reason why John H. Johnson started Johnson Publications was because there were no black-owned publishers in the United States. And because there were no black-owned publishers in the United States, we had white people controlling the black image. And as they controlled the black image, they presented the most negative images of black people in their media, like their magazines and newspapers, where they often chronicled stories of black people being brutes, black people being Jezebels, black people being mammies, and presenting slanted stories about crimes that were perpetrated that were allegedly perpetrated by black people against white people, and then using that slant to get convictions against those black men. Or they would go out here and present stories about lynchings, and those stories would all be slanted. And your John H. Johnson wanted to counter those negative stories about black people and those negative images of black people in the 1940s with Johnson Publications Ebony and Jet, which were designed to present us with a positive image of African Americans, a humanized image of African Americans, and present the stories of black people and the black experience for the entire world to see and for them to come to their own conclusion regarding the facts presented to them. So Johnson Publications started out with an extremely noble mission as the first institution of black media. Unfortunately, over the years, as the company grew, what happened was the company didn't do a good job of adapting to the times. And I noticed that with Johnson Publications as far back as 1989, when I was trying to read magazines like Ebony and Jet, and I noticed that the writing was on possibly a third grade reading level. Even worse, they spent more time talking about celebrities instead of giving us substantive stories about the black community, the black experience, or talking about topical issues that could improve the quality of life for African Americans. And that was the big problem with Ebony and Jet and Johnson Publications back in the 1980s. And that's what I believe led to the decline of Johnson Publications in the 1990s and the 2000s, and led to the eventual sale of Johnson Publications Ebony and Jet magazines to a white-owned company. So that was the sad, tragic end of this iconic black-owned institution from the publishing side, and the company Johnson Publications was still trying to go on with its archive of photographs and images that it had for many years, for many of the stories it chronicled over time, and it was trying to go on and compete in the world of cosmetics with the Ebony Fashion Fair cosmetics line. Now, the Ebony Fashion Fair cosmetics line, this was also an iconic institution because this was the first black-owned cosmetics company in the United States. And this was a cosmetics line that was designed to help black women have a positive image of themselves and present colors of makeup that would look good on darker skin tones. So the Ebony Fashion Fair line was a institution meant to help black women. Unfortunately, just like Johnson Publications, the Ebony Fashion Fair line just didn't keep up with the times and just could not compete effectively against other brands. Now, Ebony Fashion Fair was a major event back in the days of the 40s and the 50s, and it was one of the inspirations for me writing the ISIS series book, ISIS, the Beauty Myth, where I created this Rahima Sanders character who grew up during the time of Jim Crow and was a model for your Ebony Fashion Fair fashion show. Because at the Ebony Fashion Fair fashion shows, you would have black models be able to go out here and model and promote and sell the cosmetics and Ebony Fashion Fair fashions and cosmetics. So when it came down to Ebony Fashion Fair, it was a major event at one time in the black community because black women could not model for white magazines in the 40s or the 50s. So the only place where they could present a forum to be models and be a part of the fashion industry was Ebony Fashion Fair. Unfortunately, as integration came up in America in the 1960s, what happened was, again, Ebony Fashion Fair just was not ready to adapt. And the Ebony Fashion Fair brand, yes, it was very popular, but it just never became a household name after that because, sadly, when it comes down to black people, the white man's ice is always colder, and the white man's brands are always better. And many of the spellbound people in the black community ran to go buy products from companies like your Revlon or many of your other brands out here, instead of going out here and continuing to support this black-owned company. Now, this company, Ebony Fashion Fair, was still trying to go on in this 21st century, just like Ebony and Jet was trying to do. Unfortunately, what happened to Ebony Fashion Fair is they had a series of issues as related to a product recall and several other financial issues. And this is one of the reasons why your Johnson Publications, the once iconic institution in the black community, is now filing for Chapter 7 bankruptcy and getting ready to liquidate all of its assets. Because what's really sad about this whole situation is that this whole iconic institution probably could have gone on into the later 21st century under good leadership. Unfortunately, your John H. Johnson did not really leave Johnson Publications in competent hands. Now, your John H. Johnson, he had a daughter, and he left his institution in the hands of his daughter. Unfortunately, female leaders, in some cases, don't really know how to manage an institution like your Johnson Publications. And under her leadership, the entire Johnson Publications institution fell into a further decline because she just didn't know how to lead it, and she didn't know how to set a direction for it because she really didn't have a vision that allowed her to adapt to the times. Now, as a publisher myself, I saw where your Johnson Publications was making mistakes, and the mistakes that they were making were some that could have easily been fixed. Now, they should, as I saw it for the publication side, they really needed to adapt to the times. And what's really sad about Johnson and even the new owner of Ebony is they still have not adapted to a substantive content platform. Instead, Ebony is now a black feminist magazine that doesn't appeal to anyone. Before, it was a black elite magazine, but as I see it, the direction Ebony should have gone was being a black magazine that presented stories about the black community, the black experience, and went out here and presented us with articles of substance that would have given readers a reason to go out here and buy this magazine. When I look at Ebony, I saw a magazine that wasn't really talking to black people or talking about the black experience that black people were going through. There were no articles about things like black nerds. There were no articles about things like black fantasy or science fiction. There were no articles about black superheroes. There were no articles about black wrestlers. And there were no articles about the black goth subculture. Those kind of articles would be the kind of articles that would get people to go out here and pick up a magazine. And if you had photographs of things like black wrestlers, people like black nerds, people like black science fiction and fantasy fans, or black goths in a magazine, you would get some sales. Unfortunately, what your Ebony and your Jet tried to do was pander to black celebrities, and they tried to sell black celebrities all the time. Unfortunately, people could go out here and get articles about black celebrities from bloggers like myself, and they could go out here and watch numerous YouTube videos for free. And they didn't need to pay $4 or $5 for a magazine that featured content that they were getting for free. So if you have a magazine, you really want to get content that the readers can't get anyplace else. And that was one of the big mistakes your Johnson made on the publishing side. The other one was selling to that white-owned company, because now the black image is now controlled by white people from the old black media perspective, and they can take our image and rewrite and revise that image to be whatever it wants as related to media from the 20th century. And the other mistake that your Johnson made was with Fashion Fair Cosmetics. Now, when it comes down to black cosmetics, this could have been a billion-dollar institution. But again, because the Johnson family didn't have a leader in charge of the brand who had a vision, they didn't really understand who their core audience was or how to market to their core audience as related to product. Because cosmetics is a billion-dollar business, and your Ebony Fashion Fair was a major wealth-building asset that I believe was completely mismanaged because it just didn't have that leader who had the vision to try to sell this product to black women and try to present positive images of black women. Now, if you really wanted to have a promotion with celebrities, this was the brand to have the celebrities go out here and promote, but they would rather have them on the face of a magazine without ever talking about how their products would be sold in that magazine. And when it comes down to Ebony Fashion Fair, you would think they would have been focusing on trying to show how their product would appear attractive on the celebrities and models, which were the foundation for your Ebony Fashion Fair in the beginning, showing us how this makeup makes black women beautiful, but there was no real agenda for that, nor was there a plan to really get that Ebony Fashion Fair name out there for people to see and people to know as the #1 makeup brand for black women. That was another mistake that your Johnson Publications made under the incompetent leadership of his daughter. She really did not understand the value of the assets she had, and that's what led to the end of this old black media institution, an old black media institution that has died, and sadly, it didn't have to die, because in the hands of a proper visionary, this institution could have gone on into the later 21st century and possibly the 22nd century. And I'm sad to see Johnson Publications go out of business like this and go into bankruptcy like this, because this was a storied institution in our community. It was a place where black people had control over our image. It was a place where black people hired other black people. And it was a place that was where we could tell the stories about our experience. And the lessons learned here from this old black media institution for new black media is that you have to be flexible, you have to adapt to the changing times, and you have to be able to be flexible enough to be able to maneuver and reach those different marketplaces, reach those different audiences, and find those small customer bases that you can transform into larger ones, because your Johnson publications could have made millions of dollars with their fashion fair cosmetics by trying to sell them to the black goth subculture, and they could have sold their magazines and publications if they featured stories that appealed to those groups of black people they didn't pay attention to, like featuring excerpts from stories from black fantasy writers, black sci-fi writers, and talking about topics featuring black nerds or other black groups. If they had tried to appeal to those smaller niche groups in the black community, I believe Johnson Publications would have survived, because they would have created the niche content that would have had readers seeking out their magazine instead of passing it by on the newsstands and the drugstores like CVS and Rite Aid, where I used to see Ebony and Jet. If you'd like to try some of my SJS Direct publications, which feature positive images of African Americans like the ISIS series, the E-Steam series, the John Haynes series, the Temptation of John Haynes and the Spinsterella trilogy, or my men's issues books like Stop Simpin' and The Man Crisis, you may do so by clicking the link to Amazon.com. And if you want to help me keep making videos and publishing books by paying for the book covers, you can donate to my Patreon or my PayPal by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.